The ability to deploy code to production is very essential in delivering values to your product. Deploying code should be as easy as development so that you are confident of the code which is going to your production, and also when there is a bug detected, you can make that small little change so that you can quickly fix the bug and move on to the development part. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can use GitLab's CI CD pipelines to not only build Docker images out of your codebase, but also show you how using just a click of a button, you can deploy code using GitLab's runner to your production server. So what I do nowadays in terms of deployment of code to my production server is very simple. If my build process passes, then I know that nothing is breaking, and then I just click on this play button and relax, because now everything is orchestrated and automatically GitLab runner will update my production server with the latest code base. So without wasting much time, let's get started and see how this can be done. But before we do that, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon so that you are notified the next time I create a new video.
So to get started with the entire flow, first we need to create a new Laravel project. Now to create a new Laravel project, we should have PHP and Composer installed on our machine. But this time what has happened is I don't have PHP or Composer on my machine. And I'm going to take a different route. This time we are going to use Docker to create a new Laravel project and then use Docker to do the development. Now, this is not a mandatory thing. If you don't want to use Docker, you can execute all the simple commands like something like composer create project Laravel/Laravel project name. Something like that will work for you. Or if you have Laravel installed, the binary for Laravel, right? You can, I think you can do Laravel new and then the name. But we don't have any of that. And hence what I will do is come over here and I will execute this command. But before we execute this command, let's understand what is happening. We are running a Docker command called docker run. And we are saying that when the command is over, it should remove the container which got created. Okay. Then I'm mounting the current volume, which is the current folder, to the /opt folder inside the container. Okay. /w is the working directory. We are setting our working directory to opt. Okay. Then we are using this image, shipping Docker PHP Composer latest, to get PHP 7.4 version. I could have done this using the official Composer image, but it was creating a Laravel instance with PHP 8 as the version, but I want to use PHP 7.4. Okay, so I am using this shipping Docker. This is what we are executing on that container, which is composer create project Laravel/Laravel and then my code base. Now if I hit enter over here, you can see it will start creating a project and start downloading the Laravel dependencies. And you need to understand, this time it didn't download the image, because if I show you my Docker desktop, I already have shipping Docker image over here, which is a 446 MB Docker container. Yes, I know it is a little on the higher side considering that I can install PHP, but then that's the fun. I want to try something out different, and hence I did this. Okay, so the new package got created, not package, sorry, but the new project got created, and if I now do ls, I can see this folder, my code base. So cd my code base, and now if I do ls, I can see all the files are over here. And let's open it up inside Visual Studio Code, and we can see all the files have been created and if I do docker container ps, I don't see any container running. That's because the moment this command finished, the container was deleted. What still remains over here is the image, so that next time if I want to run that command again, I don't have to download that 446 MB image from Docker Hub and execute the command, but it will be available locally. Okay, so yeah, that's about it in terms of installing a new project of Laravel using Docker container. So now that we have our code base ready, let's look at creating a blank project on GitLab where the entire thing is going to happen, right? The entire CI CD pipeline is going to run on GitLab. So obviously, let's first create a blank project, Laravel CI CD. Let's make it not a private project, but public one, so that everyone can access the code base. And I will not initialize a README and not enable static application security right now. Although it is free, we will leave it for now and just create a new project. So this is created, and now I need to follow these instructions. The only thing is I'm not going to do a git version of it. I'll have to do an HTTP. So let's get started. So I have initialized a Git repository using the git init command. Then I did git add to add all the files to Git. Then I made a commit message. Now, the next thing is I need to tell my local Git folder that it needs to push to an origin. In our case, the origin is the GitLab URL, right? So I'll add the HTTP URL git remote add origin. If we go to our documentation, it says git push origin main. This means it is going to create a branch called main, and that's where we are going to initialize. I'll call it master. It is giving me an error. I think the HTTPS is not working. So at any point, if you have such problems, you can remove the git folder, because so far I haven't done anything major. Let's see if I am able to get this into working. Okay. This also didn't work, which is a problem. Bad permissions. I think this can be solved. Yeah, this is working. So what has happened is my office GitLab account typically works on HTTPS, and my personal one is using my personal SSH key. So this one is my personal GitLab account. That's why Amitav Roy 7. And in here, if I now refresh, I can see my code base, right? So that's pretty much it in terms of creating a blank repository and then pushing our code base to GitLab. And now we will see the next step, which is creating the setup on an Linux server where we will configure the runner and start the CI process. Let's look at how we can create a new EC2 instance, which we will use to not only host the GitLab runner, but also our Docker container for running our Laravel application. So this is my EC2 dashboard on my AWS account. I'm in the North Virginia region, and once I click on launch instances, I'll get quite a few options. What I am interested in is an Ubuntu server 2004 LTS version. I'll select 64-bit x86, not the ARM. And then let us look at what are the different versions or instance types that are available on AWS for us. So T2 Micro will give me one virtual CPU and 1 GB of RAM, which is sufficient for me right now. So let's choose that. You can use any other as per your convenience and requirement. This is a demo, so I don't need a big server. Storage for now, I think 10 GB is enough. Okay, you have the ability to increase the volume, so don't think that it is a one-time configuration, and 10 GB initially is going to be good enough for me. So let's go ahead and add tags. I'll keep it to nothing right now. The important thing is security groups. Create a new security group. So security group is like a firewall for our EC2 instances. It allows us to configure which ports should be open and stuff like that. Let us create one quickly. Now SSH is open from anywhere, which ideally will be an IP address which I use through my VPN. For now, it is open to all. I'll additionally have HTTP, which is port 80, and that should be open to all. And that's about it. Let's just review this. So we have one micro instance. These are the stuff, and I click on launch. At this point, you will see an option to create a new key pair or use an existing one. I'll create a new one. Key pair is like, how do you say? This is like the key which you will use to log into the server. Okay, so it's the key for the lock at your home. If the server is your home, this is the key, and it is very important. So be very careful with this particular key. You should not lose it. Now I have named it as Laravel CI CD. I'll download this key pair. It should go inside my downloads folder as a PM file. And now I'll hit launch instances. Let's do that and wait for AWS to spin up the instance and be ready with that particular instance. In the meantime, I would like to tell you a few things about the EC2 instance which we just created. So by default, when you create an EC2 instance, it will give you a public IP. Okay, this public IP is kind of a temporary IP because if you stop the instance and start it again, you will get a new one. Okay, these are temporary IPs or floating IPs which get, it gets assigned to all the instances. So if you are planning to point a domain to this particular server, then ideally you should use an elastic IP. Elastic IP by default is not chargeable if it is assigned to a running instance, but if you keep an elastic IP and it is not assigned to a running instance, then you will be charged for it. Okay, so basically it means you should not be keeping elastic IPs booked with you and not adding it to an instance. Okay, fair enough. So let me see if the instance is ready. It's still saying pending state, but in the meantime, let's try to do ssh-i. Okay, this is my key file, Ubuntu, and then the IP address. It will ask if the fingerprint can be added. I'll do yes. Okay, it says the permission of the file is to open. Ideally 600 should be fine. And if I try again, let me see. Right, we are able to access our server. So we just created an EC2 instance and we were able to successfully get into our EC2 instance. So now that the EC2 instance is ready for us, why don't we first install the GitLab runner? But before we do that, let's understand what is GitLab runner. The GitLab runner is a daemon which runs on the server, and whenever the pipelines are getting triggered, right, and you want to build your container image and do certain kind of stuff, you will use your runner to execute these jobs. Okay, now there are two types of runners available with GitLab. There are runners which GitLab provides by themselves, which is on their own shared infrastructure. You can use that. There are certain limits in terms of how much, how many hours of runner you will get every month or something like that. There are limits. Or the other option is that you have a runner on your own infrastructure. Now, to have runner on your own infrastructure, there is one more advantage, which is your code, your client's IP is not going into some other containers. I know this might sound silly, but when it comes to security audits and questions, believe me, this is a very important thing. An auditor may ask whether the client's code is at any point of time checked out on some other infrastructure. And at that point, you might have to say that yes, the deployment process is in a way where we are using shared runners, and so the code base is checked out on some other instance. So to get rid of that, and also to ensure that your environment variables or security keys, which are not part of your code base, never goes out of your infrastructure, it is a good idea to keep the runner something which you own rather than using the shared infrastructure. However, if it is I would say, your hobby project, or you're not very um, particular about the shared part of the entire deployment process, you can still use shared runners. Obviously, many people are using it because GitLab is providing it. So the decision is with you, but it is important to know the difference. Go to settings, CI CD, and then inside that you will find runners. Expand it and you will see the installation options as well. First, let's try to install it. Choose the environment. I am on Linux, AMD 64 architecture. That's fine. I'll copy this, go to a server and execute it. Next thing, let's give it executable permission and user add GitLab runner, create home, GitLab runner. Okay, so this is the user that we are using to SSH into the server. That's what I understand. I don't know whether I should create a user called GitLab runner. Let's just call it developer. And let's hit enter. A user has been created. Now, obviously, because we have some different naming convention, we'll have to modify this command a bit. Developer, right. So what are we doing? We downloaded the binary, something like that. Downloads, right. And then we gave it executable permissions. We added a user, and then we did GitLab runner install. Okay, so this is there. Sudo runner start. Okay, let's do that as well. Sudo systemctl, or rather GitLab runner list. What all commands do we get with GitLab runner? We do get status. So okay, let's see, is running. Okay, this is good. And lastly, we need to execute this command. See carefully, it says register URL is this and registration token. Okay, so we need the token over here. Let me clear that out, and let's close this pop-up, and this is my token. Okay, let me copy that as well, add it here. Okay, that's bad. I didn't copy the entire thing but kept the old one. Let me try doing it again. Control C, Control V, or rather Command V, and hit enter. Enter the GitLab instance URL. This is fine. Token is fine. GitLab CI CD demo. Let's name this master, and what else? Okay, we will see. Executor. So executor is basically who is going to execute the jobs. I'm saying that will be a Docker user. So Docker basically will be using Docker rather than saying that. Okay, this is interesting. Yeah, I have added that in my notes. I'll show you. So where is it? This is important. Docker stable, right? So Docker stable is the Docker image that I want to use. Okay. And one thing which we need to change is, with this thing, right? Okay, let me show you again. So sudo gitlab runner list. Now we have this. Okay. And a config file was created, which is gitlab runner config.toml. And initially, when I was trying to get things done, I'll show you, where is my Safari? I'll show you my pipeline. It took a lot of time for me to understand what is the mistake. Can you see the number of times my build failed? Right? It was a humongous effort. And the basic problem was that with latest runner, it tries to connect using TLS, and if that is not configured correctly, what is going to happen is it will fail to connect. So there are certain things which we need to change. I'll show you what they are. So first of all, let's do sudo vi etc gitlab runner config.toml. We are here. Okay, token, everything is fine. Privileged, I think, is true. Yes, privileged. There are 2-3 things which we need to check. Executor is Docker, that's fine. Cache S3, GCS, Azure. TLS verify false. Okay, and privileged is volumes. That's interesting. I did privileged true, but TLS verify false. Okay, image name I need to change. Fair enough, let me do that. This is done. And this line needs to change as well. Okay, come over here and I'll write it out. Now, only thing which I'm not very clear is I've done TLS verify false and still I'm using the volume certs client. Let's see whether this works or not. I know this configuration was working previously because after making these changes, finally I was able to get my runner to properly work. So yeah, this works. But if there is any problem and if you know about it, do let me know. But right now, yes, this is something which seems to be working fine for me. Right, so this is done, and let's try and go to my CI CD runners. All right, so my runner is now visible over here. This means the connectivity between GitLab and my server is on. The only thing which I would like to do is run untagged jobs. I'll check this and do save. Okay, go back to my CI CD settings. Right, and now I need to install Docker on my server, obviously, because everything is going to happen through Docker. So let's go to our server, apt-get install docker compose -y. So it will automatically do things. Sudo apt-get update. I think that was missing. Should have done that. Now it should work. It does. And in the meantime, okay, we created this user, which is fine. We need to create an authorization key for the user, which we just created. Okay, we'll do that while after this gets installed. Okay, so Docker is installed now. And if I try to do Docker or Docker compose, it is giving me the list. So yes, these services are running properly, no problem there. But we are going to SSH to the server using the user developer which we created, right? But to SSH, we need to create a key for that particular user. So let's execute this command. What it will do is it will log in as developer, and then it will create. Okay, I don't have a password. Why is it asking for a password? Authentication failed. Okay, so let me try this out. I'll do etc ssh config, and in here there is one thing which I need to change. Password authentication. But it is still asking for a password, which is a little weird because we created a user, but then we never gave it a password. Why is it happening? Let us try one more time. Will it allow us to add this? Okay, the user already exists. What is the command to remove a user? Linux remove user. Remove delete, yes. User delete, user del. Okay, user sudo user del. Sudo user del developer. Okay, that's done, I think. Now if we do this, okay, now it is asking for a password, which is still fine. Full name, room number, work phone, home, all these things I don't need to do. Is this information correct? I will do yes. A user must have been created now, and then what we need to do is add this user to the Docker group, because this user is going to execute some Docker commands, and obviously for that we need that user to have the ability to, be in that group. Okay, so now if I run this command, okay, it will ask me to log in as that user. So now I am developer, and if I now go to home, developer, and do lsal, I don't have a SSH folder. Let's do this. Okay, generating public private RSA key pair. Enter file, yes, that's the file name. I don't have any passphrase, and a key is created. I'll tell you what this is. Let's go inside the folder and do lsal. So I have two files now. Okay, as I told you, like we are logging into the EC2 instance using a PM file, right? So this PM file is the private key for us, and there is a public key which is added as authorized key inside the authorized key file. Okay, so this is called the PGP protocol, or the open PGP thing. Here there are two files, the public file and the private file. The .pub is our public file. So if I do cat id underscore rsa.pub, this is the public version, SSH RSA. Okay, this needs to be inside our authorized keys file. So what happens is, when we use, now the second part of the key is, that shouldn't have happened. Okay, cat, I did a cat instead of clear. Let me do this. Cat id underscore RSA. You see, this is the private key, correct? So using the private key, when a user tries to log into the server, it checks, the server will check with its own public key and figure out whether this user is allowed to log in or not. Okay, and what I will do is just copy this entire thing over here, come to my Safari browser, and over here there should be something called as variables. Okay, I have already done that because otherwise it will take a lot of time. So yes, This is a variable. You can do add variable and you will get this interface. Okay, so name it as ID underscore RSA. I think in my previous video I did staging underscore RSA, but my YAML file, which I'll show you in a bit, expects the variable to be ID underscore RSA. So I have changed it, make it as a file and not a variable. Okay, so I'll just replace this entire thing and ensure that you have one line at the end. If you don't do this, believe me, it will not work. I spent about half an hour, 45 minutes just figuring that out. Thanks to the community, I was able to figure that out. But yes, add that enter and save time. Okay, this is done. I have some other stuff. For example, server user. Server user is fine, I think. Reveal values. This is developer, which is fine. I need to update my IP. I was previously trying with a different IP. I'll update that. Where is Firefox? This is my IP. So come over here. Oops. Right. And do edit. This is a variable, which is fine. So no new line required. And you should mask this variable. Server user is fine. Server IP is fine. And this is my entire .env. Again, this is a file. Okay. The entire .env is over here, and with these four files, with these four variables, I think we are generally good to start our runner using the YAML file. But before that, let me check quickly the steps. So yes, this is done. I have my runner configured. This is the configuration which we have gone through. We installed Docker. This is done. We created a new user. The key is added. Oh, this is not done. That's the reason the notes are very helpful. As I told you, I will do clear, allow. Right. There should be an authorized keys thing, but for that, what basically we are doing is cat the public key and we are adding it into authorized keys. ls al, and we have the file cat authorized keys, and we have the entry over here as well, right? So this is done. Get back to our notes. Yes, we have done that, and now we need to look at the process of creating an image on the Docker library. So when we are using the Gitlab's CI CD pipeline, the most important file is going to be this .gitlab-ci.yml file. Okay, so this YML file is something which tells GitLab what we want to do. This is something which I would say primarily my friend in my company FocalWorks, Amol, has researched on, and then he figured out everything. And after that, when he has done everything, I tried it on my machine because we wanted to create a documentation, and I generally become that person who will be using the documentation, feeling that I don't know anything what is going on, and see whether the documentation works or not. That is something which we call as the recipe. Okay, so in any R&D that we do, we create this recipe, and I was responsible for confirming that everything works. So I will explain you what is happening in this file. So first thing that we are doing is, before running this script, we are echoing $env content to an env file. Now let's go to Safari and see this prod env. Okay, this is something which we are using as our source for creating that .env file. But then the question is, how is it $env underscore content? So let's see. This is variables which we have defined. These are some variables: latest tag, latest commit, okay, driver, TLS directory, And this is what we are referencing over here. Okay, these variables are available everywhere throughout the YML file, and hence the sequence really doesn't matter. So we have created this .env file, and then there are stages. What are stages? So I'll tell you again. Let's go back to CI CD pipelines. Can you see this two things? One is build, which says passes, and one is prod underscore deployment. That's exactly what stages are. We create stages, different stages where different things can happen. For example, there can be one stage where tests are happening, there will be one stage where the build is happening, and then there is the third stage where the deployment is happening. Okay, so we can have multiple stages, and each stage has its own responsibility. Coming down, we have variables. Obviously, this is the registry name. Okay, reference name, latest. We are always pulling the latest image, and that's the reason we have done that. Okay, tag commit is useful when we are getting the code base. Now, this is our first stage. The build stage is where first we are using Docker latest. So this is basically Docker inside Docker. We are using this service, Docker 19.03.0 Docker in Docker. This is the service where this entire build process will happen. What are we doing over here? We are creating that Docker instance, and inside that instance, first we are executing this command, which is docker build -t. The commit tag is the latest, and we are using the current Docker file, which will be converted into an image. We will go to what the Docker file is, but first, let's understand the script. Once the image is created, we log into GitLab, okay, using the token. Now, these things are available when the pipeline is running. We are not additionally sending this variable. So you can see my CI pipeline settings, CI variables in here doesn't have those variables. Okay, these are available when the pipeline is there. So we log in, then we do Docker push to the registry. Okay, and we push the tag as well. So this is the commit one, and this is the tag. Then we do the deployment. This deployment is something which basically connects to the server and executes the commands which will be responsible for pulling the image which we just created in our build process, build stage, okay, and then create the container using that image. So let's see. We are using Alpine latest, which is fine. The stage is prod underscore deployment. Tag is prod underscore deployment again. Chmod OG equals this. So basically we are giving some permissions over here. Then we have this APK update. Obviously this is something which we have stolen from the default template available with GitLab pipeline. Okay. Now this is interesting. This is SSH-I and then the private key, and this is the private key which takes this. So if you remember in our some time back, we created a private file, a private key, and we added that as a file inside the variables, and that is something which we are using over here, right? Then the SSH user, the SSH server username, server IP, we are doing Docker login, and there's token stuff, and there are quite a few things, but the ones which we are interested in is Docker pull tag commit. Okay, this is the tag which we just created in our build process. We removed the Docker container called Laravel underscore CI CD, or true, which means if the container exists, we will remove it, or it is true, so that the command doesn't break, because if it breaks, then the pipeline will stop. And then we do Docker run. Port 8080 is mapped to 80, which will mean that the Docker image is running on port 8080 inside the container. With this done, we basically have our Docker container running the image which we wanted. So this is the YML file. But then the question is, how are we building our container image? So let's first look at our Docker file. This Docker file, again, I would like to give credit to my friend Monish Narwani, who is again working in Focalworks. He's my very good friend and my colleague. He created this image or the Docker file which we use for managing a multi-tenant Laravel application, which we have been working on. And this is something which is taken from here, taken from that project. So we are using PHP 7.4 2.20 Apache. We use Apache in that. Okay. Quite a few things are getting installed over here. GD and stuff. Yes, these are required on that project, and hence I have borrowed it. Then we install Composer, okay, because obviously we need Composer. We copy the entire code base inside var www.html. We do Composer install. I have removed the dev dependencies. I mean the no dev thing, because I wanted all the dependencies over here. Okay, then I have some basic permissions over here because Apache is running on www.data. Then we copy the config file because Apache will need the configuration. So you can see I have server name localhost and my doc root is set to HTML/public because Laravel wants that the request should go to the public folder because that's where our index.php is. Exposing port 80 because that's where our application will run. Rewrite mod is added, and then we have start.sh. Okay, we copy start.sh, we give it the permissions, and then we execute it. So what is inside start.sh? So we do composer dump autoload, clear the config, we again give the permissions accordingly, and then we start the cron. Okay, and then at the end we have Apache to foreground. This is how the container will continue to run. Okay, and lastly we have this compose YML where we have services. We have services like app. Inside the app we have basic stuff. We have the volume, we have port definitions. This application depends on MySQL, which is running here. Okay, things like that. So yes, everything will be there in the code base, which I will share, but that's basically the entire flow. I can see some changes over here. Let me see what is that. Okay, this is not really important. What I can do is, let me first show you the server. We don't have any containers running. Sorry, ls all, no containers at all, and Docker images. What do we have in here? None. So now why don't we do one thing inside readme? Just clear everything, and inside here, okay, it's not getting the file, is it? Okay, will work. WIP work? No, it is not. So I'll have to fix that problem. I think I have screwed my shortcut. But let's just say we do clear readme, and if I try to push, I think I have made a mistake because the registry hasn't created. Let me quickly see. So the pipelines are here. I think the pipeline will fail because I haven't created anything in the registry. I need to do that build. Right now it will not find anything in the registry. Okay, why don't we go over here and go to package registry? No, sorry, container registry. Okay, I have something over here. Right, okay, I think I have created that because when my runner was successfully executing, right, it created that image. So that shouldn't be the problem. Surprisingly, it is taking a lot of time. I don't know, but as you can, okay, it updated a little later, but it has done quite a few things. It created the Docker image, checked out our code. It is running the Docker file thing. It installed quite a few things, and now let's go right at the end. This is going to take some time. I have seen it generally takes about 3 minutes to create the entire image, and build the final image in the registry. So we'll come back. Now you can see that composer install is happening. So far so good. These are the last steps, 8 out of 14. So you can see that the first part of our pipeline was successful. It says job succeeded, and if I go to my pipeline again, I can see there is a build which says passed. Now this one shows a gear sign. Why? Because as you can see, it requires a manual action. And this is happening because if we go to our GitLab YML, right, rules, it says when manual. So git branch equals default branch. That's the case when this thing will come up. For others, it won't. And in here, I can do this play button and it will start deploying. So before we do that, look at the server. So as you remember, initially we had no containers. We still don't have any containers, but we have a few images. So we have the GitLab runner registry. We have Docker latest and Docker 19030 Docker inside Docker, which means all the things which we had mentioned inside our YML file, this thing, the Docker DND, right? Everything was pulled inside the server, which is acting as a runner. Okay. The runner got everything, it created the containers, and then at the end, it does destroy them as well. So you only have those images in place, and these are quite small, to be very frank. Okay. And obviously inside the container, I think we should have one more. There's one tag, two tag, and if I refresh, we have 3 tags, right? So let's look at this 3 minutes ago, right? So we have this tag, okay, and we have the latest as well. And that's because if you remember, we push the tag commit and tag latest, okay? All right, so this is done. Now it's time to click on that magic button and see whether things are working properly or not. So I'll click over here, or rather over here, this play button. Deployment should have started. Okay, it says it's paused. Let me go over here and see what is happening. Should start in a bit. Okay, I think I know the problem. Let's come over here. The prod deployment tag is not added inside our runner. That is something which I missed. I was waiting for it, and then I realized that it's not picking up, and hence I need to add this tag. Hit save, go to the pipeline, and you can see now it started. So yes, we are in business. Let's look at the logs, what is happening. All right, so this is done. And now if I run container ls, can you see that our container is running over here? Let me see if I can do curl localhost 8080. And yes, this is working. Our application is running locally. Now the only thing which I need to do is configure NGINX so that it starts showing up on the server IP. So we saw that our container was running inside our server because we could do a curl call and see the output. Okay, see, this is Laravel, and somewhere here it is showing, the version and stuff. So I clearly understand that this is running, but then the problem here is if I go to Safari and if I type the address of my server, nothing is coming up because first of all, we don't have any HTTP service running on port 80. So we need to install NGINX, and then I need to tell NGINX to reverse proxy the traffic coming on port 80 to port 8080 because that's where my application is running. So What we need to do is very similar to how we run any node application. Our node application, let's just say, runs on port 3000, and then we use NGINX to point to that. So we will be doing very similar stuff. So let's see first, how do we install NGINX? Sudo apt update, right? Let's do that quickly. Okay, I'm a developer. I don't want to do that. I want to run everything using Ubuntu. Okay, update is done, and then sudo apt install nginx. With this, ideally, what is going to happen is, if I come to this particular URL, right, it should start showing me the default nginx page, and it does. So which means our server is now serving something on port 80, but we don't want to see this page. Obviously, we want to see our Laravel application. So what do? Let's come over here, and this is, the user creating the node application. This is fair enough, and everything is fine. Now in here, what he is doing is cd etc nginx sites available, copy the default as my server. Fair enough. Let me follow the same steps. Okay, cp default as my server. I think I will need a sudo. Yes, so let's do that. After changing the directory, the second command is copy. That's fine. Next, open the file and add the appropriate directives. So let's see what we need to do. Oops, there is some bit of code over here. Let me first copy this thing and paste it inside Visual Studio Code. I don't need API. I don't need overview. What I need over here is listen to port 80, localhost. This is all fine. And this should be 8080. And let's come back over here. Maybe I'll remove my server, rm my server. I'll do cp default, and I'll create a backup of this default.bck. It is always a good idea to create a backup file before you are playing around with the configuration, because if you make a mess out of it, you always have the backup to work with. Okay, what I'm going to do is vi default, and oops, I will just remove everything over here. Delete. I'm going to my insert mode and I'll paste things. Okay, yes. So what do we have? Server, this port 80. Let's see if this works. Sudo system ctl nginx, sudo service nginx. Let's do config test and see whether the test passes or not. It does. So we can now run restart. Ideally you should reload, but we don't have anything running, so that's fine. Oh, and that's it. See, our Laravel application is now running. And how do we confirm that our port changes work? Let's come back to Visual Studio Code, close everything, and go back to welcome.blade.php. And over here, let's just say documentation. Laravel is wonderful, right? Why don't we find that documentation? Our code works. Okay, this is done. Ideally, this means if I commit code changes to welcome blade, okay, and if I now push, what is going to happen ideally is that, first of all, if we go to pipelines, it is going to trigger our build process. So we will wait for our build process to complete. Let us go inside. We'll have some idea where we are in terms of the progress. But as I told you, typically it takes about 3 minutes. So our job is completed, which means now we will have a new container registry, a new tag. Yes, we can see that. If we go inside, we will see the latest is updated, pushed 1 minute ago, and we have this pushed 1 minute ago. 4D144C2. Is this similar to what our commits are? Ideally it should. I don't know. Let me confirm. No, it's not. Okay, that's not a problem. But now the next part, which is, if you go to pipelines, you'll see, right, this is now available. So let's play that, start looking at it just to see what is happening. Okay, and it just completed, which means now if I refresh, we can see our code change is now visible. So can you see how easy it is to deploy? And that definitely means that the way your deployment is working is so easy and so seamless that you can almost deploy to your production server every day. And that's the beauty. You code, you deploy. If you find any issue, you quickly fix it and you deploy again. That's where CI CD comes into picture. All right, so this is how we run CI CD on GitLab. We saw how we started with creating an EC2 instance where we installed our runner. We started creating our container image, and then we use the Gitlab CI YAML file to orchestrate the entire flow. And finally, we have this buttons which allow us to deploy our code to the production server, or for that matter, any server, with just a click of a button, right? So no developers need to have production access, no headache of what will happen if things go wrong, because this is a well-tested process, something which you have been running again and again, so everything will work properly. I hope this gave you a good idea of the entire CI/CD pipeline. Yes, it was done on a Laravel application, but as you understand, the creation of the image is the most important thing, which is our build part. That build image can be for a Laravel application, for a Node application, for WordPress, Drupal, whatever it is. If you just figure that piece, I think you will be able to use this particular pipeline as is for any kind of project.